Business Review, a daily program that delves into the latest and most significant economic stories. From stock markets to currency news, Business Review covers the most up-to-date stories in the global financial world.
The Asian Development Bank, the ADB, said developing Asia's already slowing growth is set to weaken sharply this year, hit by the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic before it bounces back strongly next year. The Manila-based lender said its baseline forecast called for growth in developing Asia, a group of 45 economies that includes China and India, to slow 2.2% in 2020 from a previous forecast of 5.2% matching last year. ADB's chief economist Yasuyuki Sawada warned in a virtual briefing that the pandemic can turn into a financial crisis, noting that tourism-related industries will be hard hit and it's important to minimize negative impacts on the poor. After the health crisis brought China's economy to a virtual halt in the first quarter, an ever-growing number of countries and territories have reported a spike in infections and deaths, leading to widespread travel bans and stay-at-home orders. Measures to contain the contagious flu-like virus have hammered the global economy, leading economists to believe the world is heading towards a deep recession.
The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic's shock to China's economy is temporary, as gloomy prospects shrouded the world economy in 2020 amid the pandemic. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, projected a contraction of global output in 2020, with a worldwide recession possibly exceeding the level of the 2008 global financial crisis. However, Liu Keqiang, Vice Governor of the People's Bank of China, said it's still too early to predict the extent of the impact of COVID-19 on the global economy, though signs of disruption in supply and trade are manifesting. Liu told a press conference in Beijing that as for prediction of the world economy, his observation is that there will be considerable impact, but it's premature to predict the extent of the impact or when there will be an upturn. The pandemic is impacting the economy in several ways. The first is the supply chain. Due to the lack of parts and raw materials, some sectors and some companies cannot proceed with their normal production. The second is trade channels. Some products, after being produced, cannot sell because of dropping orders. Both these two factors are very prominent. The official said China has ample policy tools to stabilize its economic growth and that the impact of the coronavirus outbreak is likely to be temporary. China is introducing a slew of policies to caution the economy and crank up consumption and employment. The government has promised to appropriately raise the fiscal deficit ratio, issue special treasury bonds, increase the scale of special bonds for local governments, and guide the interest rate to decline in the loan market. Some local governments and business operators are handing out vouchers to boost consumer spending, as short-term analysts say would gain better effect if coupled with expectations on steady job gains.
The Chinese President Xi Jinping's inspection tour of Zhejiang has sent out a clear message that China will continue to pursue green development despite the economic setback caused by the pandemic. According to a commentary published by the China media group CMG, an analysis released by the United Nations predicted the global economy could shrink by up to 1% this year due to the pandemic. The International Monetary Fund said in March that the global economy had fallen into a recession as bad or worse than that seen in the aftermath of the 2008 global financial crisis. As the global economy faces a gloomy outlook, China is also under great pressure in its economic and social development. As the world's second largest economy and one of the countries hardest hit by the pandemic, will China's goal of building a moderately well-off society by 2020 be affected? Can China return to the old extensive development mode for the sake of good economic data? Well, President Xi Jinping's inspection trip to Zhejiang province provides a clue, particularly his stop in Yukon. The village became rich decades ago by opening mines and cement factories, which also caused environmental pollution. In August 2005, Xi Jinping, then party secretary Zhejiang province, visited Yukon, where he praised the village transformation from developing a stone economy to promoting the ecological economy. They led to belief that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. In 2019, the per capita income of the village more than quintupled that recorded in 2005 to nearly 50,000 yuan or $7,000. As the president said when visiting the village, the economy should not be developed at the cost of destroying the environment, and the environment itself means the economy, if you protect the environment, will receive rewards from the environment. The president also visited Gigi National Wetland Park, which opened to the public in 2005 as the first of its kind in the country. The ecological environment of the park was once severely damaged during the expansion of the provincial capital Hangzhou some 20 to 30 years ago. Over the past 15 years, the wetland not only has helped improve the ecological environment of Hangzhou, but also witnessed the formation of economic, cultural, and life zone centered around it, achieving both economic and social benefits. The report of the 19th Congress of the Communist Party of China highlighted the country's intention on promoting a harmonious coexistence between humans and nature. Xi's inspection tour of Zhejiang has sent out a clear message. No matter how difficult it is, the Chinese government will keep its promise and work toward the stated goal.
Battered by Lebanon's economic crisis, Hassan Zaitar was already struggling to keep his family fed when the coronavirus lockdown stripped him of the little money he made as a minibus driver. Now housebound in Beirut, Zaitar is racking up debt at a local grocery to provide rice and lentils for his 4 children. Zaitar once earned enough to support his parents, but now the future scares him, saying that he is worried more about hunger than the coronavirus. A suffocating economic crisis has left Lebanon's poor with little or no means to cope with extra hardships. 2 weeks into Lebanon's lockdown, there are growing signs of de-separation. Protests have erupted in the northern city of Tripoli and the Bekaa Valley about mounting hardships. Hamada, a homeless hairdresser who lost his job, has offered to sell his kidney. While he used to be able to afford a certain lifestyle, the 35-year-old said he now lives in poverty and has considered suicide. Some 6 months before the virus outbreak, Lebanon's long-brewing economic problems came to a head as capital inflows slowed and big protests erupted against the ruling elite. The currency has sunk and unemployment and inflation have soared. The heavily indebted state, which in March defaulted on its debts, is badly placed to help the poor. With a population of about 6 million, including 1 million Syrian refugees, Lebanon had recorded 479 coronavirus cases and 12 deaths as of April 1st.
Shares of Luckin Coffee plunged over 80% after the company in China announced the suspension of its chief operating officer and several other employees for their misconduct related to the fabrication of transactions. The company said the suspensions were the result of initial recommendations from a special committee which investigated issues in its consolidated financial statements for the fiscal year ending 31st December 2019. An initial investigation showed that total sales tied to fabricated transactions from the second quarter of 2019 to the fourth were about 2.2 billion yuan. A special committee had indicated to the board that the COO, Liu Jian, and several other employees reporting to him had engaged in the misconduct the company disclosed in a filing, adding that the internal investigation was at a preliminary stage. Earlier this year, short seller Muddy Waters Research said it had received a report alleging that Luckin Coffee fabricated financial and operating numbers from the third quarter of 2019. At the time, Luckin called the methodology of the report flawed, the evidence unsubstantiated, and said that allegations were unsupported speculations and malicious interpretations of event. Luckin said that it would take all appropriate actions, including legal actions, against individuals responsible for the misconduct. The coffee chain, which competes with Starbucks Corporation in China, is already facing intense pressure due to store closures in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak earlier this year.
The European Commission proposed on April 2nd a package of measures to soften the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on EU economy, including a short-time work scheme and easier access to funds for farmers and fishermen. The Commission expects the EU to go into a deep recession this year because of the coronavirus outbreak, which has slowed economic activity to a crawl across the 27 member states. To prevent firms from laying off workers when there is not enough work, the Commission proposed that all EU countries adopt a German scheme under which employers cut working hours, not jobs, and the government pays for the difference in salaries so that workers retain their spending power. To finance the plan, the Commission would borrow 100 billion euros on the markets against 25 billion euros in EU government guarantees using its AAA rating. It would then lend the money cheaply to member states, many of which have lower credit ratings. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen told a news briefing that the plan, named SURE, support to mitigate unemployment risks in an emergency, is part of a total package of measures amounting to 2,770 billion euros, adding it was the largest answer to a European crisis ever given. The Commission also proposed to increase cash advances to farmers under the EU's Common Agriculture Policy and give them more time to apply for support. The proposed measures, which still need the approval of the European Parliament and EU member states, will apply retroactively from February 1st and will be available till December 31st. The next EU budget, known as the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, should take the form of a new Marshall Plan. To stoke Europe's recovery from the coronavirus crisis, von der Leyen said the Marshall Plan was a US aid program for Western Europe from 1948 to stimulate a recovery after World War II.
Business Review, your daily source for the most critical stories in the financial world. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.